she was killed. And they tried
top
to
six
cover it
girls
up.
really look great, but you seem to have that perfect aesthetic
I wasn't
look.
into hip hop or even soul music.
There are definitely people that need a little Viagra.
Welcome to Heinz Seniors Coaching Up. Get access to the P3AK High Intensity Training ebook and its exclusive video tutorials. Commit with Heinz's coaching right now and be provided with a year of meal plans, training programs, and more. www.p3akday.com. There is no room for the littles.
I'm Dave Palumbo, founder of Species Nutrition. From my earliest bodybuilding days, I believed in only putting the best in my body, and that lives on in the Species Nutrition line of products. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Hey guys, we're super excited to be here at the LA Fit Expo. It's our third year in a row. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be launching the Tasty Pastry. It's a low-carb Pop-Tart. It's got 3 to 4 grams of net carbs. And we love this show. This is our best place to be in LA.
RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions, diet, training, supplementations, anything and everything going on inside and outside the world of bodybuilding. It is all on the table. I'm your host, Dave Faruqi. Now bringing Dave Palumbo. Dave, we were just talking a few minutes ago, date change for your Secrets of Becoming a Diet Guru course, if you want to enlighten the audience.
Yeah, it was really my fault. I didn't realize my son had a soccer game on that day. And then, you know what, a couple of other people that wanted to take it said that it was a bad date for them. So I said, you know what, I don't want to miss his last soccer game. So we're moving it to December 4th. So it's Saturday, December 4th. The Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru. It's my one-day course. It's 9 hours of me teaching you everything you need to know about diet, supplementation, performance-enhancing drugs, how to write diets for off-season, pre-contest, men, women. I pretty much answer everything you could possibly ever imagine and want to know, and I break it down simplistically so that even if you don't have a good background going into the course, you can learn just like everyone else can. It's all experience levels are welcome. And like I said, it will teach you how to break down mechanistically writing a diet, supplement program, what stuff works, what doesn't, you know, the science of everything. It's great for beginners, but it's great. I have coaches that have been coaching for 10 years, people, and they've taken the course 3 times, and they say they learn something new every time I teach the course because I try to update it. I have a book, a 100-page manual that everyone will get to download for free. That's your reference guide. It's it's my whole playbook from my whole life, basically, since I started bodybuilding. All the routines I use in there, all the different diets, and I guess you could say performance-enhancing drug cycles and all that stuff is in there. So great course. You can sign up through DavePalumbo.com. It'll send you the link to the website to sign up, and that's going to be for December 4th. If you've already signed up for the November 20th, you don't have to do anything. You're already registered. I'll contact you separately just to make sure you heard this announcement, and it will be December 4th.
Let's get to the questions. The first 2 questions, of course, or rather the first question today from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Let's pull it up real quick. Tips for building traps, exercises, reps, rep range, etc.
Yeah. You know, the Dave Palumbo Experience app is another service I offer. It's an app you can download on your iPhone or your Android phone. It's $29 a month. It's like all the videos I've ever done, all the writings I've ever written. But the thing that I think people really like about the app is this Q&A we do. We do a Q&A video for the app only. So people submit their questions and answers, their questions daily, and I answer them all on the app in an open forum. So all the people who are the app members can see the answers and the questions. And then I pick the best ones and I do a video. And you know what? The questions are so intense on that app because people really have very detailed questions. People really like it and enjoy it. So that I also encourage you to check that out as well. Question again, Sid, give me?
Building traps, exercises, rep ranges, etc.
It's a good question, because a lot of people, I see this mistake being made by women. I know some women like traps, but if your traps are too big as a woman, it kind of ruins your shape a little bit, and it kind of takes away that feminine flow to your shoulders. Women want to have nice cap delts, but with almost not traps sticking up to their neck. I mean, it just doesn't look as feminine. So I don't encourage women to do direct trap work, because you're going to get some trap work when you do rows, high row, pull rows. You're going to get some trap work indirectly on any kind of back movement you do. But to work those traps as a man, to get them to really come up so that you have that Goldberg head, as I always say, I like to do dumbbells holding with straps, really heavy dumbbells, because your arms can kind of fall into a natural position. I also like the machine where you can actually grab there's 2 bars that come out, and you can actually grab it, and you can actually do it like that. In the old days, we used to do it on a regular straight bar, and you can go heavy there, but for some reason that position with your arms in front of your body is just not that natural of a position. So to me, I feel it, but I always felt like it was just it wasn't really hitting the right area. When I can hold dumbbells that hang loosely or a bar that has a neutral grip at my side, I find that I hit my traps way better like that when I shrug up. Now you can do also upright rows, okay, with a more narrow grip. A lot of people, it bothers their shoulders. It always bothered my shoulders, at least when I started going heavy. So I never felt like I could lift heavy enough to really to stimulate the traps. That's more of a finishing exercise. But the real mass builder for traps is deadlifts. If you're deadlifting a lot of weight off the ground, your traps you're driving with those traps an awful lot. And a lot of times when we used to do deadlifts off the ground, when we would pull up, we would almost shrug the bar back a little bit at the top of the movement, just to get that little extra. And if you're deadlifting, 500-600 pounds, that's a pretty big shrug you're doing at the end. So I think a combination of shrugs with deadlifts and with maybe a little bit of accessory upright row work is the best way to build your traps.
Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not already following us on Instagram, the handle is official_RxMuscle. If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification bells. You're not going to miss any of our show segments or updates right now. All new episode of the Heavy Muscle Radio Show. And then, of course, the After Hours podcast going up last night. A lot going on, obviously, right now in the bodybuilding world. A lot of real talk, a lot of what's the word I'm looking for here?
I got a blockbuster video too.
Conversation, yeah. So
I got a blockbuster video that I did. I don't even know if you looked at it yet, Sid, but it's going to go up later this week. It's an interview with a Dr. Gary Mezos, who's got a very interesting theory on what causes coronary artery disease and how to reverse it. And not only coronary artery disease, but blockages in your brain, your carotids, your kidneys. This guy is brilliant, what he came up with. It was one of the most enlightening interviews that I've done, maybe in my entire career. It really was an eye-opener, and I think people are going to really, really love it. So make sure you check that out.
So that, and of course, all the latest controversies. Check it out. RxMuscle, YouTube. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss anything. Let's go to the questions. Let's go to Ivan Banny and ask, does it make sense to take saw palmetto if you're already using finasteride?
No, yeah. If you're on finasteride already, the saw palmetto is not going to really do much more than the finasteride is going to do. So I usually have people start off with a high potency saw palmetto, like what we have in Testalize from Species Nutrition. That works well for a lot of people. It's enough. It's really good for women who have hair thinning or acne issues, or even teenagers. I mean, you take that and it really, really tremendously helps it. Some men, however, have they're very high DHT converters. I'm one of them. I wish I could use my product and get the results I want. And you got to go on finasteride, and that's all there is to it. And I don't have side effects on it because I produce so much DHT that finasteride doesn't suppress me too much. In other people, they take even 1 milligram of finasteride and they have no sex drive, and they get their DHT levels tested and on blood work and they're 0 or they're very, very low. That's too much. So if you're not a high DHT converter, you should go with a high potency saw palmetto extract. And a lot of those saw palmetto extracts on the market are really cheapies and they don't really do very much. You'll notice the difference between the ones that work and the ones that don't. Like I said, try my Testalize product. It works really, really well. And estrogen control is important too, because, you know, for prostate enlargement, you know, if you're taking a DHT blocker, you also want to take something that's kind of going to get rid of the extra estrogen in your body without also, you don't want to flatline your estrogen. So these are things, it's all about balance. It's about balancing testosterone, estrogen, and DHT. When you get the right balance, higher testosterone, lower DHT and estrogen, but not too low, that's when you feel great and you get the best results. And that's how I crafted the Testalize product and put it together, based on balancing those three hormones. It's not just about boosting testosterone, because if you boost testosterone and you boost DHT and you boost estrogen, that's not what you want. You have to balance the three of them.
But serious and silliness, the commercial you see at the top of our broadcast, prebiotics versus probiotics, the difference.
Okay. Prebiotics are like the stuff that the probiotic bacteria consume for fuel. So if you're taking a probiotic that's a bunch of different bacteria or even one strain of bacteria, I actually recommend you take one strain at a time. So like I've told you guys this before, there's a company called Natren, Natren.com, and they make something called Megadophilus, and they make something called bifidobacter. And one of those bacteria is for your intestinal tract, the small intestinal tract, and the other bacteria is found predominantly in the colon. So I take one day and I take the next day, and I actually mix it with my FiberLize product, because the bacteria need to feed off of fiber. They ferment fiber, soluble fiber that is, for fuel, which obviously if you're feeding the good bacteria and they grow, they're gonna, you know, colonize your colon and your small intestine and stay healthy there and protect. They basically create a barrier on the inside of your intestinal tract and protect it from pathogens and foreign bodies and different foods that shouldn't get through and toxins. If you're feeding them with prebiotics, which is the food source, which is basically soluble fiber, then you're giving them, you're nourishing them essentially, in essence. So I don't think you need to take a probiotic all the time, but if you're taking antibiotics or you feel like your GI tract is just not working, you can do a month of probiotics and then take a break. But as long as you're using a good quality, high potency soluble fiber supplement, you're going to be constantly feeding whatever's normally in your gut anyway, and it's going to allow them to reproduce. So that's the two of those components are important, but the prebiotic, which is fiber basically, is the most important component, because obviously we all have gut bacteria whether you take a probiotic or not. It's just a matter of whether you're giving it what it needs to flourish.
Good friend of the show, Dedgwick, most neglected macronutrient and why?
Well, for a bodybuilder, no one neglects protein. I mean, I think everyone, it's a pretty, common knowledge. You need to eat protein if you want to build muscle. Most people eat too many carbs. That's the problem, why they get fat. So the most neglected would obviously be fats. And most people don't take in the right amount of fats because they don't understand that all fats are not created equal. When they think fat, they think butter and saturated animal fat, which is obviously not good in excessive amounts. And they don't realize that the monounsaturated fats like extra virgin olive oil, macadamia nut oil, avocado oil, those are super heart healthy. They're great fat, energy producing fats, meaning that they burn really readily. They amp your metabolism up. And then of course the essential fatty acids, which are quote essential, for life. And if you want to grow, you're going to need those essential fats. Those are your omega-3s and 6s. The best ones coming from animal sources of omega-3s like fish oil, which is the DHA, EPA. Those are the two intermediates that actually do something. And then in your omega-6 category, most of us get plenty of the arachidonic acid from the chicken and meats we eat. We don't get enough of the GLA or gamma-linoleic acid, and that comes from sources like evening primrose oil or borage oil. So you got to take in your essential fatty acids and your monounsaturates and limit the animal source of fat. You do need some, because with all animal fats we get cholesterol, and you do need to eat some cholesterol in your diet if you want to have optimized steroidal hormone synthesis. But once again, it's about balance. So I think the most neglected is usually the fats, because people just don't have the education about them and they just don't know how much to take. I recommend people take about, especially off season, at least 1 gram per or a half a gram per every pound that you weigh. So if you're a 200-pound man, you should at least get 100 grams of fat per day, predominantly coming from the monounsaturated fats. and essential fatty acids.
Let's go to Ivan Bodybuilding. We get so many questions regarding training going into a contest. He wants to know, if you kept training after the show instead of resting, what would your training look like? Would you do only isolation and pump type of workouts, or would you go hard and heavy?
No, yeah, I mean, what I would do is when I would come back after a show, because I knew I'd get a good rebound, once I was rehydrated. The first week I kind of just, goofed around in the gym a little bit. I would go in there and do like maybe 6 sets of incline bench, and I'd leave. I'd go in and do, 5 sets of squats and leave, just to basically get some blood in the muscle and move things around. Once I rehydrated after a week or two and I knew my body's, electrolytes were regular, because you don't want to be lifting super heavy weights. If your electrolytes are off, you can tear a muscle. After about 2 weeks, then I would go into the gym and I would put no pressure on myself to do a lot of stuff, because I knew I was kind of run down from the show, but I also knew I was going to get a good post-contest rebound now that I was eating so much food, so I wanted to make use of that. And the funny thing was, at that point, I would be off the drugs. I would stop the drugs after the show and then go on a PCT cycle, usually, HCG, Clomid. But you still have all those drugs in your system for at least 3 to 4 weeks after the show's over. So it's not like you have nothing there. You're still going to get that nice anabolic rebound, and I'm cleaning out in the meantime. And so I would go in and once again, I would do my core basic movements. I would go back to basics. Incline barbell press for chest. Maybe do 5 or 6 sets of that, and maybe 2 sets of cable crossovers and leave. I would go in there and do legs. I would squat. I would do 4 or 5 sets of squats. I would do maybe 2 sets of leg extensions, 2 sets of leg curls, and be out of the gym. So I'm doing very low volume, but I'm lifting with high intensity because I'm not doing a lot. Now I'm not trying to set records in terms of max, reps where I'm going only 2 reps or 1 rep, trying to see how strong I was. But I was pushing with intensity to failure using really good form, trying to reinforce getting my perfect form back and squeezing everything. And because I knew I didn't have to worry about maximal weight, so I'm like, let me work on my technique, because no matter how good you are technique-wise, the longer you go, your technique can deteriorate a little bit. So if you use this time right after a show where you don't have to go and try to lift the heaviest weights to work on your technique, it kind of reinforces those concepts in your brain. I would sit there and do dumbbell presses, with maybe the 120s and just really squeeze my shoulders and do stuff like that, but not do a lot of volume. And I would train 5 days a week or 4 days a week and take a couple days off. And what I found was that I always got a really good rebound after the show.
Thought-provoking one here from Jesse Quesada. My question is, why now? Older bodybuilders have had success in the game, but now with health problems, mental problems, addiction problems, old-timers want to change the game, but never thought of changing the game when they were in it, doing everything bodybuilders are doing now to win or get bigger. So my question is, why leave the game alone? I guess this question really is, why not leave the game alone? Bodybuilders know what they're getting themselves into.
Well, I mean, there are some people that become, even with religion, the people who have no religion, they go around murdering people and then they become born again in jail. I don't necessarily endorse that, because I think that's a little hypocritical. Like sometimes when people will say, "Oh, so all steroids are bad and you shouldn't do this," and because they had a bad experience with it. But I think things can be, and I've said this from day one, things can be done responsibly. That means you can take anabolic steroids, you can eat a lot of food, okay, but you're not going to do it in a stupid way where you're not watching what your body is doing when you're doing all these things to it. In other words, you're not checking your blood pressure, you're not checking your blood sugars, you're not going for your blood work every 6 months to make sure nothing's off the charts, like your kidney function is through the roof and you didn't even know it. You got to check things. You can't do things dumb, okay? You always have to have a game plan. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with checking your blood pressure, once a day, checking your fasting blood sugars in the morning. Just make that part of your routine. Get your cardiac CT scan once a year when you hit a certain age, and maybe just get them once every 5 years when you're in your 20s and 30s, just to make sure there's nothing building up. I did this interview with Dr. Gary Nizos. You're gonna listen to it at the end of the week, and he says, look, the first thing every bodybuilder, everyone should do is go get a cardiac CT calcium score. It takes 5 minutes. It literally, there's no dye involved. They're just going to measure how much calcium are in your coronary arteries. And if you have more than you should have zero. He said, but if you have more than like a couple hundred, that's something you got to keep an eye on now, and you have to start watching that because that could lead to blockages in your arteries. And he goes through the whole process of what happens and why we get these things. And he's got a novel theory about what he calls nanobacteria. They've discovered recently these little microscopic bacteria that are like 100 times smaller than regular bacteria that they take up home, they set up shop in your blood vessels, and they start not on the outside of the blood vessel, on the inside, and that's what causes the initial plaque, build up. And he'll go through the whole process of how calcium gets laid down, and then these things become solidified, and it goes on and on and on. And it's an interesting process. But these are things that you can track now with the diagnostic tests we have today. We didn't have 20 years ago. You guys can be bodybuilders, do what you need to do in terms of drugs, although you shouldn't be overdoing it because that's ridiculous. Some people take insane dosages. That's just moronic. People have done that all through time, though. There's always extremists. But if you do your dosages in effective dosages without going extreme, you do your diagnostic tests, you eat the right food, and you train with intensity, you can be a huge freaking bodybuilder and still be healthy. They're not mutually exclusive. See, I don't like people say, oh, you shouldn't do any of the drugs. This is terrible. We got to ban them. That's not gonna happen. That's not the solution. The solution is to go for diagnostic testing and know what you need to keep an eye on for yourself. Don't let anyone else tell you. I've told you, I've put it out there a million times. I'll continue to put it out there. You get these diagnostic tests, you know your numbers, and you don't have to worry about anything.
Let's go to Bilal Hamid, a good friend of the show. Best test to deca dosing ratio while bulking for the advanced lifter.
Look, I always found 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week work great with 400 to 600 milligrams of deca per week. So that worked well for me. I think guys get too high in the deca dosage, and that's when they start getting the deca dick and all the different side effects that go with it. Because what happens is if you take too much deca, just like if you take too much trenbolone, you raise your prolactin levels too high, and prolactin inhibits erections. Can cause gynecomastia with the discharge coming out of the nipple. So it's all dosage related. So, most people like deca. Why? Because it makes your joints feel good. Well, guess what? It makes your joints feel good at 200 milligrams a week. You don't have to take 1,000 milligrams a week to make your joints feel good. So think about that. The testosterone is the most anabolic thing in your body that you're taking. So that's where you want the effective dose to come from. That's the 1,000 milligrams a week. The anabolic is it's almost like a boosting agent. It's like putting nitrous oxide into your gas tank, in your fuel tank. It's going to make the engine run hotter and perform better, but it's not really, in and of itself, it's not going to really do very much. So if you just took deca, you're not going to grow that much, but it's the testosterone. But it's the combination of the two because they work synergistically. So I think 1,000 milligrams of testosterone with, like I said, 400 to 600 max of deca per week.
I just got a kick out of Tyler getting a crack out of...
He likes deca dick. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah.
Personally like it.
That's the stuff I used to crack up about 4 or 5 years ago until it became like part of my vocabulary. So, Infiltration Muscle Lab. How much does sex hormone binding globulin and prolactin matter in blood work tests? Does it even matter?
Yeah.
Is it different for people who never use PEDs versus guys on PEDs?
Right. Well, sex hormone binding globulin is what. It's a measure of how much of the testosterone in your blood is bound to the binding proteins. Now, if you have a high amount bound, that means it's less free. So you would think that's not good. But if you're taking a really high exogenous dose of testosterone and other drugs, and your your sex hormone binding globulin is high, it really probably doesn't matter because you have such a high level of testosterone anyway that even if you're binding up more than you normally would, you still have an enormous amount that's available for building muscle. However, if you're on like an HRT dose or you're not on anything and your sex hormone binding globulin is very high, that's not good because now your body is not utilizing a lot of what you're producing. Usually the lower your testosterone, the higher the free rate is because your body knows, hey, we don't have a lot of testosterone around, we better free up more of it so we don't want to bind up so much of it. That's why you want to also test your free testosterone. But what I see is when guys take exogenous amounts of testosterone, large amounts, like 1,000+ milligrams a week, usually total testosterone's high, free testosterone's high, and sex hormone binding globulin for some reason is low. So I think this what we call pharmacological effect of the steroid supersedes and all these other things that naturally, mechanistically normally goes on, like physiologically. If you had a normal, endogenous dose of testosterone that your body was producing, you would have normal levels. But I think when you take a large amount, it just overrides everything, and that's just the way it goes. As far as prolactin goes, if you don't have side effects from high prolactin, like gynecomastia or erection problems, then it doesn't really matter if you have high prolactin. It doesn't inhibit muscle growth in any way. However, I know guys that have just a little bit, their prolactin's just a little high and they have every side effect from it. So in those cases, you would want to take something that inhibits prolactin, like cabergoline, which is the brand name I believe is Dostinex. So you would take a 0.5 milligram of that 2 to 3 times a week. But if you're not having any side effects from it, then don't take anything.
Let's go to Hardcore Dan. Difference between omegalyze and generic fish oil, health benefits, etc.
Well, omegalyze, first of all, is not just fish oil. It's the omega-3 fish oil, obviously at a nice high dose of 3 grams, but it also it's balanced by the omega-6 essential fat, which is gamma-linolenic acid, or GLA, and coming in the form of evening primrose oil. So to this date, I don't think anyone combines fish oil with evening primrose oil. They've combined flaxseed with evening primrose oil, but we know that plant sources of omega-3s don't produce, the human body doesn't convert it to usable form. So you need to use the animal source of omega-3s, like I said, fish oil, krill oil, stuff like that. So we put fish oil plus evening primrose oil in effective dosages, 3 grams of fish oil, 2,600 milligrams per day of evening primrose oil. And then I also added another fat that I don't really talk about that much, but it's an interesting fatty acid. It's an omega-7 fat called palmitoleic acid, which is not really an essential fat, but it's a great insulin sensitizer, which means your blood sugars will be lower because you'll be much more sensitive to insulin. And it also reduces total body inflammation. So if you have high C-reactive protein levels in your body, which is a measure of total body inflammation, it lowers that. And we know that the body doesn't want to be chronically inflamed because that leads you open to more diseases like cancer, heart disease, arthritis, and stuff like that. So it's a very well-balanced essential fatty acid supplement because it doesn't just contain one thing or another. You don't have to buy 5 different bottles. It's all in there in an effective dose in a 1 month supply, and that's why I'm pretty proud of that. It's one of our best-selling products. Once people kind of caught on to what was in there and they realized, hey, I'm saving money because everything's in there already, and I don't have to try to combine it myself, people started buying it more often.
Take 2-3 more questions. Nico Kent, another post-contest question. After a competition, how do you incorporate carbs into the diet to avoid excess of fat and water?
I mean, you're going to rebound after a show because you're taking diuretics, you're restricting fluids. I mean, that comes par for the course. A lot of times, if you do start gaining more than 10 pounds right after a show, I tell people to stay on a little bit of diuretic for a day or two just to kind of get rid of that. But assuming that now your water balance is normal after a week or so, and you want to try to figure out how many grams of carbs should I eat so that I stay full but I don't get fat, that's trial and error. So usually I start guys off on 40 to 50 grams per meal, so it's like about 240 to 300 grams per day for a guy who's over 200 pounds. And then we see how their body responds. If they look flat and they're telling me they're starved and they're still really lean, then I give them more carbs. Okay, if they're look like they're going to explode like the Michelin Man and they're putting body fat on and they're just uncomfortable, then I'm going to cut their carbs back because maybe they don't need, some people need a lot more carbs to load glycogen. Even though that a person is 220 pounds, 2 people, you would think they would need the same amount of carbs to load their glycogen stores because their glycogen stores should be very similar, right? But the truth is that not all carbohydrates that you eat go to glycogen storage. A lot of it goes to energy. So if person number 1 has a crazy fast metabolism, maybe they're only storing 50% of the glycogen that they're eating, or the carbohydrates that they're eating as glycogen, whereas person number 2 might be storing 80% of what they're eating as glycogen and only using 20% for energy. So that's why it's a trial and error method.
Let's go to a question about anxiety, sleeplessness. It's from Pantelis dermatoxis. I'm an overthinker with an overactive schedule in mind. This causes general anxiety in my system, which leads me only sleeping 5 hours a night. I don't feel tired and my training and nutrition is on point. I'd like to find a way to relax more. I use GABA 500 mg, 5-HTP 100 mg, and yet I think 5-HTP does not work good for me. Melatonin also doesn't help as my problem is not falling asleep, but staying more time asleep. Any suggestions?
Well, my Somalize product obviously has GABA and melatonin in it. GABA, which he mentioned he was taking, acts like a relaxation neurotransmitter. It stimulates GABA receptors in the brain, causes relaxation, just like Valium or Xanax would do, only it does it naturally. The problem is that will relax you enough to fall asleep. Melatonin is usually what keeps you asleep in a deeper state of sleep, 3 to 6 milligrams a day. Usually 3 milligrams is more than fine. If a person is not able to sleep on those two products combined, which is what we put in Somalize, then there's something else going on. Now, a lot of people I notice who take Trenbolone, for instance, have a lot of trouble staying asleep because the stuff really revs and overstimulates the nervous system. When you wake up in the morning, you drink a cup of coffee and it wakes you up, you're good, but by the end of the day, it wears off, right? And you go to sleep. If you're taking Trenbolone and injecting it, it's in your system all the time. So it's like you've got this central nervous system stimulant there constantly trying to wake you up, essentially, so that you can, be alert and aggressive. And so a lot of people have trouble relaxing at night from that. And that's why a lot of people, like pre-contest, do take Xanax or something like that, or Ativan or something like that, to help them sleep those last 3 or 4 weeks, so they just cannot stay. Because think about it. Imagine you got Trenbolone trying to keep you awake, and then you're starving on top of that because you're dieting. It's a recipe for never wanting to sleep. You just want to get up and eat your next meal. So that's something you can explore. I have a product on DavePalumbo.com called Euphoria that a friend of mine makes, and I've been selling that for years. And that's also a really nice relaxant. It's got a couple different GABA metabolites that, once again, will relax you. But the only thing that I know that really keeps you asleep naturally would be melatonin. Other than if you want to go to the benzodiazepines, like the longer acting ones like Xanax or Ativan. But it's a personal decision, obviously.
Last one here, and again, this is one of those that we tell everyone, look, we're fielding questions about bodybuilding, but we're also fielding questions about life, right? In terms of your advice, general life lessons. So Chris Holm wants to know, how do you get things done, right? I mean, keep in mind, for those that may not be aware, the number of businesses Dave operates, a family, clients. I mean, if I email him, I know I'm not getting an email back until 3 a.m. A little better with the text, but emails, yeah. But the point is, obviously, you're juggling a lot of balls. Yeah. Procrastination is something that creeps into everybody's minds at a certain point in time. Yeah. Have you ever struggled with procrastination, and how do you go about dealing with that? How do you deal with that in terms of just all the things you're dealing with to get it done?
It's a very good question, and it's very hard, and it's I always struggle and I toil with it a lot because I'm a super anal retentive, overachiever by nature. But at the same point, I'm like this Zen Buddhist that wants to be in basically with nature and at peace. And so I'm always battling to find this balance, so to speak. And it's hard, and I wake up, from the minute I wake up, I don't stop, going. And, sometimes it's, that's why at night I really try to turn off all these, I know it sounds weird because I'm on social media all the time. We're posting stuff all the time, but I don't really read a lot of social media. And so people say, did you see what so-and-so said about you? Or did you read this? Or did you see? A lot of times I'm like, no, I don't, because if I was sitting around reading social media all day, I would never get anything done. That's procrastination. Sometimes I'll be in my car before I go I drop my kids off in the morning at school. So 8:30, I drop them off and I go to the gym now. And I'm sometimes in the parking lot before I'm in the gym, and I'm just looking through some posts here and there. And before I know it, I'm like, holy shit, a half hour passed. I could have had my workout done already. And I'm so mad at myself that I wasted that time. And you will struggle with, that and feel guilty about not doing stuff. And I'm always I try not to watch what other people do, because then you feel like, all right, well, yes, I did 10 videos this week, but maybe this guy's video is bad. Maybe I should have done a video on that too. And then maybe I'll go to the studio and I'll record something. So you get caught up. What you have to do is you have to come up with a game plan every day. This is what I'm going to do today, and execute it. And don't worry about what anyone else does. Now, if someone, wins a show, or someone drops dead and I got to do an extra video on it, you squeeze it in. I understand that. Obviously, if I got to, talk to the community about a very pressing, event that happened, it happens, but what I a lot of times do is when something dramatic happens and it throws a monkey wrench into my schedule, like maybe one of my kids is sick or something happens in our industry and I need to respond to it, I say, you know what, take a deep breath. You don't have to get everything done today. All right. So you won't be able to record a snake video, or Tyler and I we won't be able to record 5 videos today. We're only gonna be able to do 4. And that's just the way it goes. And so you got to roll with the punches. And sometimes when you take a step back and take a deep breath and allow life to redirect you, sometimes it redirects you in a better direction. And so I try to go with the wind. I remember David Paul once told me this, the Barbarian brother, and may he rest in peace. He's no longer with us. He said, Dave, I spent my whole life trying to take my own path. And instead of going through the doorway, I'd always try to bash through the wall. Like I try to take my head and go straight through the wall because that's the quickest way to get through there. And that's how I felt I needed to do it. He's like, but as I got older, I realized that, you know what? I just let the wind blow me through the open doorway, even though it seems like it's a further distance, but it takes me much less time and much less effort. And I think that's what you guys have to try to do. This is what I try to do. I try to take that metaphor and apply it to my life. I let my internal guidance system guide me where the right way is. Even though it doesn't seem like it's the right way, it always winds up being the right way. And so don't buck the system. If you can't get something done for this day, you'll do it tomorrow. Believe me. There's nothing that pressing that you can't wait till the next day. But by the same token, don't use that as an excuse to become complacent and procrastinate, because then what happens is it becomes contagious. You don't do something one day, then the next day you don't do something, and then a week passes, then a month passes, and before you know it, you got lazy. Don't confuse laziness with redirecting sometimes your itinerary because of life happening. Because life always happens. There's no way to stop it. My clients contact me. I got COVID. I can't do the show. My mother-in-law died. We have to go to drive 18 hours. Then go. Life happens. Family first. Bodybuilding second, and that's just the way it goes, because bodybuilding will always be there for you. And that's my words of wisdom. It's nothing that insightful other than to say, don't take life so seriously.
And that's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Reminder, right now on the channel, all new episode of Heavy Muscle Radio, and then of course yesterday, all new episode of the After Hours podcast. For Tyler Shore and Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.